For years, people assumed Prince Philip took his final judgments to the grave. But Princess Anne has just revealed something that was never meant to leave the family Philip's private words about Camilla's ending inside the monarchy. Not a rumour, not a court whisper. A written message, preserved like a secret weapon. And the shocking part isn't that Philip wrote about Camilla, it's what he predicted would happen when the family finally ran out of patience. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. Anne didn't introduce it like a scandal. She introduced it like a responsibility she'd been carrying for years. The way she speaks about it makes one thing clear. This wasn't found in a public archive or pulled from some official folder. It was kept off record, away from royal archivists, away from the people whose job is to preserve history while quietly deciding what history is allowed to be remembered. Anne discloses that it wasn't a formal document at all, but a personal note, something closer to a journal entry written in Philip's own blunt style, with no attempt to soften the edges for anyone's comfort. The note, she says, isn't sentimental. There are no warm reflections, no nostalgic family memories. It reads like a final assessment, the kind Philip would write when he was done pretending and no longer interested in being polite. Anne describes it as cold clarity on paper words, arranged like a verdict rather than a complaint. And within that verdict sits a term that immediately tightens the air in the room. Philip used the word ending. Not problem, not phase, not drama, ending. An outcome. Something inevitable, like he wasn't guessing what might happen, but warning what would eventually have to happen. Anne reveals the most chilling part next, not what Philip wrote, but who he wrote it for. It wasn't meant to comfort Charles. It wasn't meant to be read in a private moment where the king could sigh, feel hurt, and then move on. Anne says Philip's message was meant for her to act on one day. A line in the sand handed to the one person in the family known for discipline, loyalty, and ruthless practicality when a situation becomes dangerous. That detail turns the note into something heavier than opinion. It makes it feel like a trigger Anne was always expected to pull when the time was right. As she speaks, a hush falls over the senior royals around her, not the hush of curiosity, but the hush of recognition. Because the moment Anne admits she has kept this hidden for the right moment, everyone understands two things at once. First, she's been sitting on this for a reason. Second, she believes that reason has arrived. That's when the story stops feeling like a history lesson and starts feeling like a countdown. Anne hints that Philip believed the family would face a choice between survival and loyalty, and she doesn't say it lightly. The phrase lands like a warning to the entire institution. Survival means preserving the monarchy's future, protecting the next generation from a repeating cycle, and keeping the family from tearing itself apart in public. Loyalty means protecting the person who has fought for her position inside that family, even if her presence has become a pressure point that never stops inflaming the system. Philip, Anne implies, believed those two things could not coexist forever. At some point, the family would have to pick one. Then Anne shares the line that stunned her when she first read it. The line she says she never forgot, because it didn't sound like fear, it sounded like certainty. Philip warned, she will not leave quietly. And in that sentence, Anne isn't just revealing Philip's opinion about Camilla. She's revealing Philip's prediction about what happens when the family finally decides enough is enough. Not tears, not apologies, a fight, a counterattack, a storm. But Anne doesn't reveal Philip's words alone, because the moment she speaks, the palace realizes Philip's note could trigger a chain reaction they can't control. Anne's revelation doesn't land like gossip, it lands like a detonation. Because within minutes, the palace shifts into crisis mode, calls are made, meetings are pulled forward, and people who never panic suddenly move like they've seen this storm coming for years. The most telling sign? Nobody asks if Philip's note is real. They ask where it is. Because if Philip truly wrote about Camilla's ending, then someone has been trying to prevent those words from ever becoming public. The first move is subtle, which is how the palace always fights. Senior aides suddenly attempt schedule changes that look harmless on paper, delay this appearance, adjust that timing, push a meeting forward, suggest Anne rest, suggest she reconsider. They don't say they're stopping her. They never say it directly. They simply try to slow the moment down until it loses its power, until the news cycle shifts, until Anne's resolve can be softened by pressure and fatigue. It's containment disguised as care. Then the second move comes, and it's sharper. A crisis operator is brought in, not a press aide, not a spokesperson trained to smooth public optics, but someone who manages internal emergencies. The kind of person who doesn't care what the public thinks yet. The kind of person who cares who has access, who is speaking to whom, and whether a single document can become a blade aimed at the wrong throat. Their presence says one thing: this isn't a PR issue, it's an institutional threat. Anne feels the shift immediately. In the palace, you can sense it in how people stand, how staff stop making eye contact, how conversations shorten. She is quietly warned about stability and timing, the two words always used when someone wants truth postponed indefinitely. They tell her it could inflame tensions, create headlines, bring back old divisions. They imply she has a duty to protect the king from humiliation, to protect the monarchy from embarrassment. Anne doesn't raise her voice, she doesn't argue, she simply refuses to back down, because she understands the trick: once you accept not now, you accept never. Palace loyalists begin pushing a very specific fear. Philip's words could humiliate Charles and fracture the family publicly. That fear isn't entirely false, and that's why it works. The palace is built on the belief that public unity is survival. So they frame Anne's revelation not as truth-telling, but as sabotage, an emotional act that risks tearing open the king's authority. They talk about respect and legacy, but what they really mean is control. They want the note neutralized, the narrative softened, the sting removed before it reaches daylight. Meanwhile, Camilla's circle scrambles in a different direction. They don't waste time debating Philip's intent. They focus on the dangerous question: who knew Anne had the note? Because knowledge is exposure, and exposure is vulnerability. Calls go out in tight loops. Names are quietly tested. Staff are asked innocent questions designed to catch hesitation. The goal is clear: identify the leak points, isolate the risk, and figure out whether Anne is alone or supported. Anne hints, almost casually, that this note was referenced in an older private meeting, just enough to make certain faces stiffen. That detail changes everything. It means this isn't a surprise revelation to the inner palace world. It's a resurfacing. A ghost coming back. A fear that has existed quietly for years, waiting for the wrong moment to become the right one. And if it was referenced before, then someone has already tried to get their hands on it. That's when the cliffhanger slips out, carried by a nervous staff member who didn't mean to reveal so much. The note was once requested and denied, not misplaced, not forgotten. Requested, which means someone with authority wanted it secured, controlled, possibly archived under official rules where Anne could no longer decide when it surfaced. Anne refused then. And the question now becomes terrifyingly simple. If the palace tried to obtain that note before, what are they prepared to do to obtain it now? And the reason they wanted Anne silent becomes clearer when we learn what Philip actually wrote, because it wasn't a complaint, it was a warning. When Anne finally reads Philip's words aloud, the room doesn't react with outrage, it reacts with silence. Because the note isn't cruel for the sake of cruelty. It's precise. Philip writes like a man diagnosing a disease inside the family, and then he drops the line that changes everything. A prediction about Camilla's ending that sounds less like opinion, and more like a plan the family will one day be forced to carry out. Anne doesn't perform the reading. She delivers it the way Philip would have wanted: plain, controlled, and impossible to misunderstand. The first sentences land like a cold assessment, not an emotional rant. Philip frames Camilla as a long-term destabilizer, not a temporary scandal, not a storm that blows over. He writes as if he's watching the monarchy's foundation crack slowly, and he's naming the pressure point before it collapses. That's why the room goes silent. Silence is what happens when people recognize a truth they've been living around for years but never dared to say out loud. Philip's words imply the family will one day face a choice between public peace and private loyalty. That phrase hits like a trap because it forces an ugly question. Public peace means keeping the image intact, keeping the headlines calm, maintaining the idea that everything is settled. Private loyalty means protecting the person who has fought to stay inside the family, even if her presence keeps reopening old wounds that never healed properly. Philip writes as if he believes those two cannot coexist forever, and that the family's greatest mistake was pretending they could. Then the note shifts from diagnosis to prediction. Philip states that Camilla's position will become unsustainable once the next generation takes full control. Not because the public will suddenly revolt, but because the internal tolerance will finally run out. The implication is brutal. The family has been enduring something for years, not because it's healthy, but because they believe they have to. Philip suggests the next generation will not accept that bargain. They will not pay the same price for the same peace. That's when Anne feels it too. This isn't just about Camilla. It's about the changing balance of power inside the monarchy, and how patience becomes weaker the closer you get to a new era. Philip's harshest implication cuts even deeper. He suggests Camilla would eventually try to secure power through narrative manipulation, not simply through titles or public appearances, but through controlling what people believe, shaping what gets remembered, and turning loyalty into leverage. He writes as if he doesn't fear Camilla's presence as much as he fears her influence, her ability to turn the family's private fractures into tools that protect her position. Anne pauses slightly at this part, because it doesn't read like guesswork. It reads like someone describing patterns he has already watched unfold. And then comes the most ominous detail. Philip's note includes a timeline like warning: not now, but soon. Those 3 words sharpen everything into urgency. Not now suggests restraint, the patience of an old soldier who knows timing matters. But soon suggests inevitability, like he's saying the countdown has already started and nobody can stop it, only manage it. In that moment, the room feels the difference between a warning and a prophecy. Philip wasn't simply venting frustration. He was mapping what comes next. The emotional undertone becomes impossible to ignore when Philip's words turn toward Charles, not as a son, but as a king in waiting. Philip implies Charles would be too weak to see the danger coming, or too emotionally trapped to confront it before it became unmanageable. Anne can hear the disappointment behind the sentence, the kind that doesn't scream but still wounds. It's not a public insult. It's a private fear written down with brutal honesty, that Charles would delay hard decisions until delay became disaster. And then the cliffhanger lands, the part Anne can't soften, because Philip didn't soften it. The note references a final trigger, something that would force Camilla's exit. Not a slow fading, not a gentle shift. A trigger. A moment that flips the situation from tolerable to impossible. Philip doesn't spell it out fully in the lines Anne reads aloud, but he makes one thing terrifyingly clear. He believed the trigger was real, predictable, and already forming. But the note doesn't just predict Camilla's downfall, it reveals why Philip believed it would happen. And it leads straight into a secret the palace has buried for years. Anne's voice tightens when she reaches the part Philip never intended outsiders to hear. Because Philip doesn't just criticize Camilla, he ties her to a specific incident inside the family that, in his mind, crossed a point of no return. It wasn't about headlines. It wasn't about public opinion. It was something private, personal, and devastating, something Philip believed proved Camilla would always put herself first, even if it cost the family everything. Anne doesn't rush through this section of the note, and that hesitation tells the room everything. She's not protecting Camilla. She's bracing for what happens when she says it. Because once the incident is mentioned, the story stops being theoretical. It stops being about tension or complications, or the safe palace language people use when they want pain to sound manageable. This is the part Philip wrote like a scar, short, sharp and permanent. Philip references a private confrontation, an internal clash where Camilla allegedly overstepped a boundary with a senior royal. Not a minor social misstep, not a careless comment. A boundary that exists for a reason, because some lines inside the family are meant to be untouchable. Anne doesn't lay out every detail in public terms, but she makes it clear that Philip believed Camilla stepped into a space she had no right to enter, and that she did it with the kind of confidence that comes from knowing someone will protect you afterward. Then Anne hints at what makes the incident truly radioactive. It involved Diana's memory being handled in a way Philip saw as unforgivable. The word handled sounds mild, but the way Anne says it, it makes it feel like desecration. Not because Diana was being spoken about, but because her legacy was being managed, edited, repositioned, treated like a piece of furniture that could be rearranged to suit a new story. Philip didn't see it as a family adjustment. He saw it as a moral violation. As a rewrite too far. As proof that if Camilla could reshape Diana's memory, she could reshape anything. Anne reads Philip's tone, and you can hear the rarity of his rage in it. Philip was known for bluntness, but this was different. This wasn't a sharp remark meant to sting. This was anger that comes from betrayal, from watching the family step over its own conscience. Anne implies that this incident truly scarred him, because it wasn't just about Camilla's behavior, it was about the family's response. Who defended her? Who stayed silent? Who pretended it wasn't serious enough to confront? The note suggests Charles was warned directly. Not after the fact. Not in hindsight. Directly. Philip, according to Anne, made it clear to Charles that this wasn't something to smooth over. It was something to stop. But Charles chose to manage the situation instead. That single word, manage, becomes the sharpest accusation in the room. Manage means keep it quiet, keep it stable, keep everyone smiling, keep the public unaware. Manage is what the palace does when it wants to avoid war. Philip's note makes clear he believed managing this wasn't peace. It was surrender. The emotional stakes rise because Anne is no longer just exposing Camilla. She's exposing Charles's weakness in the same breath. And that's why her voice tightens. Anne is loyal to the crown, and Charles is the crown. But Anne is also Philip's daughter, and Philip's words are sitting on the table like a duty she can't ignore. She feels the collision between family loyalty and institutional survival, and the room can feel it too. Because if Anne says Philip warned Charles and Charles ignored him, then this crisis wasn't unavoidable. It was chosen, slowly, through hesitation. Anne pauses before the last line in this section, as if she already knows the shock it will cause. And then she reads it. Philip wrote, "If you protect her, you will lose them. Them. Not me. Not the public. Them. The family. The next generation. The people Charles needs most if the monarchy is going to survive." The line lands like a prophecy, because it doesn't just accuse. It predicts consequences with frightening certainty. And once that line is spoken, the family's fear becomes obvious, because Philip wasn't only warning about Camilla, he was warning about Charles's future. The most painful part of Anne's reveal isn't what Philip thought about Camilla, it's what Philip thought about Charles. Because buried in the note is an accusation that cuts deeper than scandal, that Charles would eventually be forced to choose, and that he would hesitate until it was too late. As Anne reads, the room doesn't just feel tension, it feels like history catching up. Because Philip's warning sounds like it was written for this exact moment, Anne can feel the temperature change the second Philip's words turn from Camilla to Charles. It's no longer about who belongs in the family. It's about who failed the family. Philip implies Charles confuses love with weakness, mistaking patience for strength and delay for diplomacy. The note doesn't say Charles is cruel. It says something worse. It says Charles is slow when speed is required, gentle when firmness is demanded, and trapped by emotion when the crown expects cold decisions. Anne reveals Charles once begged Philip to accept Camilla for peace, not public peace, not national unity, family peace. The kind of peace you beg for when you're exhausted, when you want the arguments to stop, when you want the room to breathe again. But Philip rejects that peace as an illusion. In his words, peace built on surrender doesn't end conflict, it stores it. It pushes it forward into a bigger war later, a war the next generation will have to fight with harsher consequences, because the earlier choices were never resolved. That's when Anne's voice tightens again, because the note implies Charles's reign would be haunted by unresolved Camilla tensions. Not as gossip, as a structural crack running through every decision. Philip writes like he can already see the future. The more Charles protects the situation, the more the situation becomes the thing that defines him. The king becomes less of a ruler and more of a man constantly managing fallout. Anne's conflict becomes painfully visible. She's Charles's sister, loyal to the institution he represents. But she's also Philip's daughter, and Philip's truth is sitting in her hands like a duty she can't deny. She doesn't want to humiliate Charles. She doesn't want to weaken the crown. Yet Philip's words force the question she's been avoiding. If the crown is protected by silence, what happens when silence becomes the betrayal? Then Anne delivers the cliffhanger embedded in Philip's note, the part that makes even seasoned insiders shift uncomfortably. Philip predicted the next generation would revolt, not with tantrums, with power, with refusal, with a quiet decision to stop playing by the old rules. That prediction doesn't sound dramatic when Philip writes it. It sounds inevitable, like he understood that patience has an expiry date, and the people who come after you will not inherit your compromises, they will inherit your consequences. And that predicted revolt becomes real when we learn who Philip believed would ultimately end Camilla's reign inside the family. Anne reveals a detail that shocks even the most hardened palace insiders. Philip's note wasn't written to comfort Charles. It was written to prepare the heir. Philip believed Charles would be trapped by emotion and obligation, but William wouldn't. And in Philip's mind, that difference mattered more than any public scandal. Because if William ever decided Camilla had become a threat, Philip believed William would end it cleanly, decisively, and without apology. Philip praises William's steel and contrasts it with Charles's softness in a way that feels less like insult and more like cold analysis. William, he implies, can do what Charles delays. William can cut what Charles manages. The note suggests William would prioritize the monarchy's long-term stability over personal feelings. Because William understands something Philip always believed: the institution survives only when the next generation refuses to inherit toxic arrangements as tradition. Anne hints Philip viewed Camilla as a temporary chapter, not a permanent queen figure, and that distinction changes the entire story. Philip wasn't imagining a dramatic public exile. He was imagining an internal end, an era quietly closed, once William has enough authority to do it safely. Not before William is secure, not before the moment is right, but once he's strong enough that no one can block him. The palace fears this angle because it sounds like a succession blueprint, a private roadmap written by the family's most ruthless realist. And Anne's final reveal lands like a match near dry fuel. Philip wrote a sentence beginning with "when William," a sentence Anne refuses to finish out loud, because finishing it would make the prediction feel like a plan already in motion. But as soon as William's name enters the story, Camilla's camp responds, because they know what Philip predicted could now become a self-fulfilling prophecy. The moment Anne's revelation spreads, Camilla's circle doesn't deny it, they move to erase it. Quietly. Efficiently. Like people who understand that one document can end an entire era. What happens next isn't a public scandal. It's a private operation, calls made after midnight, staff pressured, archives checked, access restricted, because if Philip truly wrote Camilla's ending into history, then the only way to survive is to make that history disappear. The first pressure comes dressed as procedure. A sudden request is made to secure the note under official archival rules, framed as preservation, framed as responsibility, framed as protecting the family's legacy. But Anne hears the real meaning instantly. Control. Once it's secured, it's no longer hers. Once it's catalogued officially, it becomes accessible to the same machinery that tried to silence her in the first place. And Anne suspects someone is trying to take it from her without force, because force leaves witnesses, and witnesses create scandals. A trusted aide warns her quietly that her movements are being tracked. Not in a dramatic, cinematic way, more subtle, more believable, more terrifying. Messages take longer to return. Doors that used to open easily suddenly require confirmation. Familiar faces become careful, eyes shifting away as if looking at Anne too long could become a report. In the palace, surveillance doesn't always look like cameras. Sometimes it looks like silence tightening around you. At the same time, the discrediting begins. Someone floats the idea that Philip's note was misremembered or out of context, as if Anne is exaggerating or interpreting it emotionally. It's a calculated insult, because it aims at the one thing Anne values most: precision. Camilla's allies push the idea Philip was bitter, outdated, angry, unwell, anything to weaken his authority even in death. If they can make Philip sound unreasonable, then his warning becomes a mood instead of a message, and Camilla's ending becomes a cruel fantasy instead of a serious threat. But the note becomes the real battleground fast, and everyone inside the palace understands why. Whoever holds it decides the story. With the note, Anne holds leverage. Without it, she holds only memory, and memory is easy to dismiss. That's why the pressure isn't loud. It's constant. It's strategic. It's designed to make Anne surrender the paper willingly so nobody has to take anything at all. And then Anne delivers her own quiet counterstrike. She reveals she made a copy long ago and hid it somewhere nobody expects. Not in the obvious places. Not in the official system. Somewhere beyond the palace's clean hands. That admission changes the air immediately, because it means the truth can't be erased by seizing a single page. It can only be delayed. That's when Anne explains the colder part of Philip's message, the part that makes even hardened royals swallow hard. Everyone assumes Philip meant a dramatic exit, divorce, exile, public humiliation. But Philip's prediction was colder than that. He didn't believe Camilla would be removed loudly. He believed she would be erased quietly, stripped of influence, isolated, and pushed out of the inner circle without the public ever seeing the knife. Not punishment, disappearance. Philip describes an ending based on access, not titles, removing real power first. Who Camilla can speak to. Where she can appear. What she can control, not a public banishment, but a slow tightening until her presence becomes ceremonial and her influence becomes irrelevant. Anne reveals Philip feared a loud removal would trigger retaliation and leaks, a scorched earth response that would damage everyone. So his version of survival is ruthless in a different way. Silence, distance, and a new normal presented to the public as if nothing happened at all. The emotional stakes sharpen here, because Anne admits what nobody wants to say openly: the family would have to choose morality versus survival. Tell the full truth and risk a war, or manage the outcome quietly and pretend it was natural. Philip's note implies the public would never be told the real story, only shown the end result: a reshaped palace routine, a revised order where Camilla simply no longer matters. Then comes the cliffhanger that makes the room feel smaller. Anne hints steps from the note have already begun quietly. Little restrictions. Small exclusions. Invitations that never arrive. access that shrinks without explanation. It's subtle enough to deny, but consistent enough to recognize if you know what to look for. And that hidden copy leads to the final shock because Philip's note doesn't just predict an ending, it outlines how the family survives after it. And if those steps have already started, then the final question isn't whether Philip was right, it's who is carrying out his plan right now. Anne saves one name for last because saying it changes everything. Philip's note didn't just predict Camilla's ending, it implied who would be forced to deliver it. And when Anne finally reveals who she believes is already executing Philip's plan behind the scenes, the room goes silent for a different reason: fear. Because if she's right, then Camilla isn't facing a scandal. She's facing a silent removal already in motion, and nobody can stop it without exposing the entire royal machine. Anne doesn't present it as an accusation. She presents it as a pattern you can't unsee once it's pointed out. Quiet restrictions, stacked one on top of the other, subtle enough to deny individually, but undeniable together. Camilla's access has been limited without any announcement. Invitations arrive later, or not at all. Meetings that used to include her are suddenly reshaped around different priorities. Even when she appears, her appearances feel curated safe rooms, safe faces, safe moments like the palace is slowly narrowing where she can stand without risk. Anne describes it as influence shrinking in silence, not by dramatic decree, but by 1,000 small decisions made off camera. And then Anne says what makes the entire room tense. This ending isn't being staged as an act of force. It's being staged as a natural transition. The palace's most lethal move isn't exile, it's normalization. You don't remove someone loudly, because loud removals create sympathy, retaliation, and leaks. You simply change the structure around them until their presence becomes symbolic and their power becomes irrelevant. One day the public looks up and realizes Camilla is still there, but not really. That's the disappearing act Philip described. Not punishment, disappearance. Anne implies that someone senior is orchestrating it, not a staffer, not a spokesperson. A royal figure with real authority and the patience to play a long game. The kind of person who understands that timing matters more than anger, and that the cleanest removals are the ones nobody can point to. Anne doesn't relish this. She looks burdened by it, because she knows what it means. If a senior royal is executing Philip's plan, then the family has already chosen survival over comfort, and it's happening whether the rest of them are emotionally ready or not. That's when Camilla's allies begin to panic, because this kind of strategy is almost impossible to fight. You can fight a headline, you can fight an accusation, you can fight a public scandal with counter-statements and appearances. But how do you fight invisibility? How do you fight a plan that looks like routine changes and scheduling decisions and security adjustments? You can't expose it without exposing the palace's inner mechanics, and the palace's inner mechanics are the one thing everyone is trained to protect no matter who gets hurt. The emotional twist hits when Anne admits she delayed revealing Philip's note for one reason: she needed to know the family was ready. Ready not for gossip, but for consequence. Ready to accept that this could change relationships permanently. Ready to withstand the retaliation Philip predicted. Ready to live with the reality that once Camilla's ending begins, it doesn't stop cleanly. It ripples. It fractures loyalties. It drags old wounds back into the light. Anne waited because she didn't want to ignite chaos without a plan. She wanted to reveal Philip's truth at the moment it could actually be acted on. And then she delivers the final sting, the viral cliffhanger that makes even confident faces tighten. Anne hints Philip's final line contained a date or a condition already met. She doesn't read it fully. She doesn't have to. The implication is enough. Philip didn't just describe what would happen. He described when it would become unavoidable. And if that condition has already been triggered, then the palace isn't deciding whether to move. The palace is already moving. Anne looks around the room like she's measuring who understands the danger and who is still pretending this is just family drama. Because if she's right, then this isn't a scandal waiting to happen. It's a quiet war already unfolding, with the outcome written in a note that was never meant to be public. And as the monarchy steps into its most dangerous quiet war, one truth remains: the most powerful royal decisions aren't announced. They're executed in silence. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.